The last time that I had heard, you had moved to, what do you call it?
Denver.
Oh, the Sunshine State. On Denver. Gorgeous.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. This is a special episode. I am so pleased today to be talking with Thomas Harding, who has been covering the Colorado Rockies for 26 seasons. This is Thomas's 26th season covering the Colorado Rockies for Major League Baseball. And also, Thomas and I have chatted over the years about Thomas's interest in design and logos and uniforms. And in fact, Thomas has delved into that world himself a little bit. Thomas, how are things? How have you been?
I feel good. I feel clean, ready to win a championship. I always say that. But yeah, I'm very happy to be on this show. I feel like we're kindred spirits, and we have to kind of kick this around forever, haven't we?
We have. And when you say forever, I have to share a story with the listener first, because you played a really important role for me very early on when I was starting to write for sportslogos.net. I got a press credential to Salt River Fields at Talking Stick, a beautiful spring training facility where you are right now. You are down there covering the Rockies as you have for 26 seasons. But I will never forget your kindness. And I got in there. I was looking around. I was really overwhelmed. I had never had a Major League Baseball credential before. And I think you could tell that I was a little bit sort of lost and helpless. And you just, out of the pure goodness of your heart, took me under your wing, told me what I should do, told me what I should not do, told me where I should sit or not sit, which was pretty much don't sit. It was stand and wait for the players. But you also, you told me how to sort of get in there and get the interviews with the players. I was writing a story for sportslogos.net at the time, and I'm sure you remember when the Rockies went through this, they changed their shade of purple. And,
Right.
and I talked with Cargo, I talked with Arenado, I talked with, 9 or 10 players. And you sort of, just guided me along in sort of how to do that. So I know we've chatted privately before, but I want to say right here on the podcast, thank you for being a kind soul and a good guy and helping me out when I was clearly lost with my first ever press credentials.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Hey, we all walked into a place for the first time. I think my first winter meetings, it was during the time of Denver had a newspaper war between the Denver Post and the Rocky Mountain News. I was working for the Colorado Springs Gazette, so I was not even associated with either of those two papers. I thought I was Switzerland. But when I first got on the baseball beat, it was a really strange beat because there were groups of writers. One group of writers was associated with the Post, the other with the Rocky Mountain News. There were a number of people that hardly even spoke to me. And I'm like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. We're all out here trying to get our stories together. So yeah, I hope I would have been that way anyhow, but definitely I was that way with you or anybody else that comes in.
Well, I've shared that story a number of times, and really helped me out. So I appreciated that. I've mentioned a couple of times that you've been covering the Rockies for a quarter century. Are there players over the years with the Rockies who like to talk design? Are there players who you can sort of get into this with?
A little bit. There are some players I can get into it with, but if you ask a player about his gear, it's almost every player that there is. And here's what I noticed was that back in the early 2000s,
Yeah.
the children, I'm talking about the kids on the playground and everything else. I would sometimes be a playground monitor at the elementary school. A lot of the little boys really love neon colors.
Mm.
Now, if you look at so many players now, and they were the children then, you see the sleeves, you see the socks or the shoes with neon type colors. You see a lot of almost hot pinks or orange. Some people like the teal, but there are a lot of neon colors. So I kind of saw this coming, and I've had this discussion with some players. Some players, it's funny, they will say, "Oh, I don't care what the uniform looks like," but yet I have not met a player of any distinction who doesn't spend time in front of the mirror. Okay. You know, I was growing up playing linebacker in football, and
Yeah.
everything had to be straight. Like this was before field turf or anything, you know, come on. You know, I'm going to get dirty. Everything's going to be messed up. But every player spends some time in front of the mirror. So some I have talked to about it. Lucas Gilbreth with the Rockies, he's helping with the local baseball organization. I throw ideas at him all the time. There's a prospect, Benny Montgomery, and I've talked about his high school's design and the fact that there's a school in Denver, George Washington. They're the Patriots, just like his high school. I think in Redland, Pennsylvania, or in Lewisberry, it's Redland High School. They're also the Patriots. The Patriots in Pennsylvania are red, white, and blue, like you would expect. George Washington in Denver, green and white. And they have a history of using like the Jolly Green Giant for some kind of logo. I'm so interested in it. I'd love to have a conversation with them on it. But yeah, so there are some players who will discuss it. I've also discussed some things with catchers, and we could probably do a show about catching gear and what's going on. But I had this idea, and I actually talked to the rep for All-Star who was in the Rockies clubhouse. My idea for catching gear would be to make the chest protector and the shin guards match exactly the uniform. So like say you had purple pinstripes on a white one with the Rockies across the front, the number on the front. The issue is though that there is a I think it's Wilson or someone like that, maybe Rawlings, who is the official catcher gear for Major League Baseball. So technically another company can't do the uniforms or can't do the logos, although people always put the logos on the catcher's mask. But yeah, so you know, we do have these discussions, and I think people walk away saying, gosh, that guy's a nerd.
Well, I remember it was 2017 that I wrote this article. It's actually really funny too, just as a complete aside. I had just run my first ever full marathon the day before. So I was like limping along. I was really hurting and I was trying not to show that. But I remember thinking like I just assumed every player who talked to me would just say, I don't care about the uniform. I'm just happy to be on the field. And I mean, there was a little bit of that, but every player I talked to, they all were willing to talk to me about this, not least of which was Nolan Arenado. And the thing with Nolan Arenado was I had to wait for like 10 minutes to talk to him because he was talking to some blogger about like his glove and his cleats and his, you know, all of that stuff. But
I remember that. I think that was some sort of gearhead type thing. And I haven't seen them in a while. I kind of enjoyed having them around.
Yeah. But it was, I have the article up now. It was, I spoke with Nolan Arenado, Adam Ottavino, Trevor Story, Mike Dunn, DJ LeMahieu, and Carlos Gonzalez. So it was, those are the ones who I ended up quoting in that article. And every single one of them had an opinion. Nolan Arenado in particular, I remember talking to him about, he loved the uniform with the black sleeves. He wanted the Rockies to wear more of the black sleeve uniforms. Obviously, he very famously was traded to the Cardinals since then, so he did not necessarily get that wish. I have to ask you, with your design sensibilities, what are your feelings about the history of the Rockies uniforms? Is there one that like stands out to you as a favorite, one that you wish that they would wear more, or I don't want to get you in trouble with the Rockies, but maybe wear less?
Well, it's a strange thing, but when I worked in Memphis, Tennessee before coming out here, and one of the fortunate things about Memphis was the original president of the Colorado Rockies was a man named Steve Earhart, graduated from Colorado College. He worked in the USFL, actually at the top levels. Steve Earhart was the team president. Steve Earhart lived in Memphis, Tennessee. So we actually talked through the nickname, the fact that a lot of people wanted to go with the Denver Bears, but they didn't want to be confused with the Chicago Bears and the marketing that went into the purple and black uniform. Here's my understanding, and I've never really nailed this down with Bob Gebhardt. I know we've had some discussions, but Bob was kind of behind the purple pinstripes. He had been with the Minnesota Twins and really wanted a traditional look. But also Kelly McGregor the late president of the team. He had been an NFL player, but he had come into baseball and really threw his heart into the sport. He was one of the driving forces behind the building of Coors Field. So between those two, they wanted a traditional looking ballpark, a traditional uniform. They wanted Coors Field to be Wrigley Field, meaning it stands forever.
Hmm.
And they wanted a primary home uniform that stands forever. Now, in the early 2000s, they fooled around with the purple pinstripes with a CR logo on it, but sometimes guys would wear the wrong uniform on the field. They finally got back to this is their traditional uniform. So I like that. I was lukewarm about the sleeves and the black jersey with the sleeves. I know at first they tried a purple sleeve, which I actually liked the contrast, but everyone made fun of it online. So that uniform died after one game in San Francisco. But I was lukewarm about the sleeveless uniform. I love the Pirates sleeveless, and I think that the Cleveland Indians had one when I was little, and the Reds before I was aware of baseball. But I wasn't sure about the Rockies, although they wore it going to the World Series that year. Would I like to see it come back? The issue with that is there are no teams wearing sleeveless because Fanatics is making all the uniforms for Nike, or they're all coming from one spot. I'm not sure where one ends and one begins. But if one group is making all of the uniforms, you don't want them to go to another template. So
Yeah.
nobody's wearing sleeveless. So my thought is that at some point there may be a Black Rockies uniform. They may go to the sleeveless as some sort of throwback to '07 and maybe the 50th anniversary or whatever it is, or the 30th, or I guess 20 is coming up, right?
Yeah.
2027. I could see that to honor them, but to have a black uniform, I think it would probably have to be in the same pattern with the sleeves that teams wearing now. And I would like to see that happen.
Yeah. When you think about the teams that entered Major League Baseball in the 1990s, obviously the Rockies and the Marlins in 1993, and then the Diamondbacks and the Devil Rays in 1998, those other three teams have all gone through a number of rebrands and different versions of their identity, and the Rockies have stayed true to their brand, through and through, except for, of course, the City Connect uniforms. I'm curious from your perspective covering the team, talking to the players, those green City Connect uniforms, I think people sort of love them or hate them. What's the perspective from the media and, maybe from the players you've talked to? Do they like the green license plate City Connect uniforms?
It seemed that most people liked the jersey. There was an issue with some feeling that the number on the back, because it's white trimmed in purple and it kind of goes into a white area at the top, was hard to see. I tested it because that's something that I would like that I like. I like to look at. Can you see the numbers? And as it got darker in the ballpark, you saw the numbers better. Yeah, I think glare bothered me. The biggest back and forth was over the pants. They originally had green pants that they wore all the time. I like the idea because if you're going to get away from the color palette and you're going to get away from baseball tradition, go all the way. That was my thought. But what happened was after a year, a lot of the players complained during the day it was too hot to wear green pants. Now, I'm not a big fan of this thought. I mean, you've got teams that University of South Carolina, I swear Williams-Brice Stadium is the hottest place on earth. And they come out in black jerseys, black pants, black helmets a lot of times. So I'm not sure about this, but hey, whatever. So they went actually back to their white pant with the purple stripe down the side, and it did fit the uniform. And what happened was the equipment manager here, really a really smart fellow named Mike Ponarelli, we call him Tiny. He ordered some really high quality belts to go with him. And he insisted as long as those belts are green, then it looks right because it fits in with the rest of the uniform. So the 3 years of the City Connects, by the time at the end, they wore mostly white pants with the mostly green City Connect jersey with the mountains on the front and white pants with a purple stripe down the side, but a green belt.
And then, like you say, that's 3 years of the City Connect, and then they cycle those out and they have new ones. Do you have any insight on what the new ones are going to be?
It's funny, and I think part of it is because of my interest in design. They guard that to begin with. I
Yeah.
mean, and no one will even whisper it to me. They don't even whisper it to me. And I would like maybe for your fans to come up with this, or someone who's really good on computers. This is what I believe City Connect ought to be, okay?
All
And I
right.
will describe the concept, and maybe you guys can have a little idea. A black jersey. You can come however you want to design the borders around the sleeves, just as long as it doesn't run in the sleeves, but a black jersey. And I don't know if you've seen, well, of course you've seen, the Toronto Raptors have this wonderful uniform and a logo, and it is honoring Vince Carter in the slam dunk contest. The dinosaur, kind of tucking the ball under the leg, and he scored the dunk. Okay. The most iconic picture in Rockies history is Todd Helton, both hands above his head, final out of the 2007 National League Championship Series.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine this black uniform with Rockies across the front, and on the left side where the number normally is, it is that pose. Only the one posing is Dinger, the dinosaur. Would that, or maybe you could come up with one of those where, you have a CR on one side and then on the other side, but Dinger in that pose, wearing number 17, like Todd wore. I think that would be the greatest uniform in the history of the Colorado Rockies.
Well, if they do that, I want to see the Phillies come out with a Fanatic uniform for their City Connect. Then I would love to see a mascot uniform for both teams.
That would be great. For me, even though they've won it since then, Tug McGraw jumping up and down on the mound, number 45, or it would be Tug Fanatic jumping up and down.
Yep.
That would be a wonderful thing.
I'm going to do a hard left turn here on you because there's another question I wanted to ask you. Like I said, you've been covering the Rockies for a quarter century. During that time, you've developed a sensibility for design. You've done some design work yourself for baseball teams and for football teams. Where did that interest in design come from, in sports design in particular?
I mean, my entire life I've been interested. I remember as a child, like back in those days, you could buy these non-competitive football uniforms that came in a box. There was a jersey, some cheesy shoulder pads, and a cheesy helmet. I got crayons and I did the helmet like the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, it goes all the way back to there. I remember after seeing Marlon Briscoe, he was kind of the first black quarterback in kind of the more modern era of pro football. So I'm 5 years old, 1968. I finger painted the helmet like the Denver Broncos. I mean, I've always done this, and I would stay on my coaches about changing uniform designs. In fact, when I was in junior high, I sent a proposal to the Atlanta Falcons. Other than some of the players on their defense, I had no affinity for the Atlanta Falcons. This was mid-'70s. But I sent them this uniform, helmet, and everything else. And two cool things happened. Number one, there was a guy named Charlie Dayton. He was their PR director. He actually sent me a uniform saying, we are contemplating. He sent me a letter with the little Falcon logo embossed on it saying, we are contemplating changing our uniforms for, I think it was like the 1975 playing season. They actually did at some point. The other thing about it was years later, thanks to the internet, somewhere popped up, and it wasn't exact, the timing didn't track, but I felt good that they were thinking the same. A white Atlanta Falcons prototype helmet showed up on the internet. You can buy it as a mini helmet from a few other people. The interesting thing was, if you were to look at my design that I sent the Falcons using pens and a gold, I can't remember if it was paint or whatever, because the colors were red, black, and gold. They had gold stripes in the helmet to honor Georgia Tech, red and black for Georgia. But I sent them this white helmet. It was almost exactly like it, except the one that their prototype had no gold in it. And where there was red, I had black. Where there was black, I had red. So I saw that on the internet a few years ago thinking, wow, I'm kind of looking in the right direction. So it goes way back like that. And the other thing, the closest I got earlier on to getting something on the field, which I guess I did, I got this scholarship to go to St. Ambrose College. It's now a university. It's in Davenport, Iowa. They were the Fighting Bees. They were the Bees when I went out there. And the basketball coach was a gentleman named Dean Brunson. I met him in when I was in West Virginia. I was writing for the local paper when I was graduating high school. I get a scholarship to go out there because he had no sports information guy. He knew I did some drawing. And what he did was he handed me a logo that was done, I think, by Champion Sports. It was this bee with boxing gloves on. It was an interesting little thing, but the way it looked, it would have been hard to embroider everything because back then everything was embroidery. So I redrew it and also separated the colors. And that was the other thing was for some reason, and I never figured this out, we were the bees, but the colors were red, white, and blue,
Oh,
which I wasn't sure exactly what. But anyhow, that went on. So I drew it so that the red never touched the blue never touched the red. And they ended up using it on their jackets and other things. And then after I'd left the school, it was painted on the basketball court. Then a number of years ago, it has shown up on the football helmet. In fact, they did a video saying that it's the iconic bee. Now, I've written the school a number of times and they still have not responded. I just wanted permission to go on ahead and, put that on some of the design things that I'm doing. They haven't given that permission. And I guess I'm taking the permission right now. So
there you go.
this is breaking news. There we go. But
claiming that credit.
But the people at that school, they do acknowledge that it happened because they were there for it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Now they're dark blue and light blue, which is closer to a bee.
I guess maybe like a dead bee, maybe. But
I will say this: you should look at the current uniform and the helmet. It's beautiful.
This is a baseball podcast, obviously, and
Yes.
so one of the logos that you've done is for a team called the Colorado Cutthroats, which, if I recall, before the Grand Junction Rockies changed to the Grand Junction Jackalopes, there was a movement trying to get them to change to the Cutthroats. I think people felt like that would be a good name for that team. But there is a Colorado Cutthroats now, and they very much credit you with the creation of their jerseys and their marks, a red and green and white look for a baseball team here in Colorado. How did you get involved with that project, designing for the Colorado Cutthroats?
Yeah, first of all, let's explain what a cutthroat is. It is a type of trout because, around the nation, like cutthroats, I mean, what is there, blood splattered everywhere? But I think it's the markings of the trout and around the throat area, so to speak. I'm not an expert on anatomy of fish. I know there are gills and things like that. I'm not exactly sure, but that's where the cutthroats come from. So there's a writer for the Denver Post named Kyle Newman. And Kyle was quite the baseball player in his younger days. I think he even played some intramural ball at Arizona State and has played with some very good players. He kind of manages this team, and he had found out about me through I'd actually done some work, totally volunteer with the Boulder Collegians, long time summer wood bat team here. Tony Gwynn played a few games for them. But you look, Lloyd McClendon was a Boulder guy. Roy Smalley, who played in the major league. So a number of very good major league players. And I know I'm forgetting. Oh, Joe Carter, duh. Joe Carter had played for them. So they played.
Oh, sorry, the Phillies fan just
Oh,
came
yeah,
out,
that's
guys.
right. You poor Phillies fan. We can go back to the collegians later. That was an interest. That was my first real back and forth with an organization on that. Oh, that by the way, that cutthroat name existed in minor league hockey, pro hockey. There was a Denver Cutthroats. So Kyle comes to me and asks, "Would you like to do something with it?" And he gave me the colors red and green. What had happened, they had ordered red and green uniforms. He really liked that combination with some silver. They ended up getting kind of a artist logo from somewhere else that really wasn't intended for baseball. So I'm like, I'll tell you what, maybe I could come up with something on that. So it was red, green, silver, and white. Kyle really likes all those colors. Doesn't like a lot of white in his uniform, so I had to work with that. So what happened was I came up with the logo almost immediately. And it took me a while because I'm not a computer artist, but it took
Mm.
me a while to figure out how to do it. So I ended up doing this. We worked through a shop in Denver, athletic uniforms. And we end up with a very good logo, with a bat with the fishing lure around it, much like the Cardinals. And that was a hit immediately. So I was really happy with how that turned out. I'm very happy with them. It is sort of a very slight imitation of the sea and the Colorado flags, but I
Hmm.
think it works
Hmm.
out well.
Well, I was noticing that we love our C from the Colorado flag out here in
Oh,
Colorado.
yes.
And yeah, you've got that fish on the sleeve patch on the uniform. I see that you've got the Colorado C with a baseball in the center, and then the fish sort of coming up, along the curve of the C there. So that's the Cutthroats logo that you did. You mentioned that we could get back to this Boulder Collegians logo, and I would very much like to do that. Are you responsible for this Boulder Collegians, the baseball with the Flatiron Mountains there on the front of it? Is that you?
Yes, this one is. I'm very proud of that one. I'll tell you the story behind it. So we went back and forth with the collegians. They needed new uniforms. They had the older uniforms with the red, blue, and gold in them. They weren't sure exactly which way to go. But so there's a lot of back and forth. And when you're dealing in baseball, if you think like an artist, you want to change a whole lot of things. If you think like a baseball person, you want to stay close to tradition.
Hmm.
So a whole lot of back and forth. I would say I had a bunch of uniform designs, and I really wasn't sure what to do about the logo. Right around the time that we came to a uniform, and I picked out a font that it looks like the Boston Red Sox, but it was not because I didn't want to get into, an organization of volunteers having to pay any kind of royalties.
For sure.
So came up with that, and we got the uniform done. The logo, though, was it was inspired by the Cincinnati Reds Wishbone C, and I
Oh.
had and I had seams within that. And I turned it in. They liked it. I still needed to clean it up a little bit more. They liked it, but I didn't. So we're literally in the office of athletic uniforms. Ryan Phipps is his name, son of former NFL quarterback Mike Phipps, in fact. He settled in Denver. He played football at Purdue also. We're standing there in his office, and as they're making the order, I look at my phone on Instagram. And Todd Radom, the great designer that
Of
has
course.
done so much in sports, he ran a bunch of designs from the 1970s, which was the era in which I grew up. And I saw the Seattle Supersonics logo, the iconic Space Needle with the basketball. And they were about to turn the order and go, wait a minute, this is it. So I'd already had the word mark, and I'm like, do you have a depiction of the Flatirons?
Mm.
And we put that together that very night, and that has stood. And I'm really proud of that one.
The Flatirons, if you're not familiar with the geography of Boulder, the Flatirons are these very distinctive mountains that look like an iron from like an ironing board. I guess that's where Flatirons comes from, but they are very distinctively shaped mountains and immediately recognizable in this logo. Anyone who has been in Boulder or seen the mountains behind the skyline in Boulder will recognize the shapes of those mountains that you created there. You have done work for both football teams and baseball teams. Do you take a fundamentally different approach designing for football versus baseball?
Usually there's a lot of back and forth with whoever the coach is.
Okay.
And I do have a lot of ideas about both sports. Maybe more with football because I played it more growing up and I understand some of the things about it. But I always have an idea, and my idea, say with a football team, and sometimes I'm running this with baseball and softball, is bigger is better for me. Bigger graphic on the helmet, bigger number on the front.
Hmm.
That's the thing that I try to negotiate in. I'm not always successful, but bigger to me is always better.
I think
Yeah.
that's the trend too that you're seeing in all sports right now. I think you're seeing bigger and bigger logos. All right, Thomas, before I let you get out of here, how far back does your design interest and some of your early creations. How far back does that really go?
Oh, well, I want to take you back to when I was young. One of the things I did, even I started playing football at 10 and basketball 11 and baseball at 10. But I'd come home and when I was done playing, I would draw pictures and I called it the made up league. In baseball, it was cities like Denver and Buffalo and Miami that didn't have teams. Made up league. I would actually draw these pictures and I would depict a season that way. I did it
Uh,
in football, did it in baseball, did it in basketball. The one I remember is the Florida Flamingos. But there was no pink in that uniform, actually. It was red, it was black, gold, and some sort of ocean blue. But yeah, I would do this. And that was the way I passed the time. And it kind of, I still remember it today. Sometimes I want to take a team and put them in one of my made up uniforms.
I love that idea. Thomas, this has been so much fun. I could honestly just talk to you all night about this stuff. Perhaps I'll shoot you a text next time I'm coming to a Rockies game. We could, grab a soda and a pretzel or something at a Rockies game.
That
Meantime,
would be outstanding.
in the meantime, Thomas, where can people find you online, social media, online, etc.?
First of all, Rockies.com is where I have my stories, and I encourage you also to subscribe to the newsletter. If you'll see it on the site, and it comes in twice a week, and that's where a lot of copy comes to you. As far as social media, Harding underscore at underscore MLB is my Twitter, and I do have Blue Sky also.
Absolutely. I am a subscriber to your newsletter. I read your articles, but I also love the design work that you share on social media sometimes as well. Thomas, thank you so much. This has been a blast. I can't wait to catch up with you at a Rockies game again this summer. And hey, enjoy spring training. Enjoy Arizona.
Hey, thanks. Can I add in one other thing? My main social media accounts are on Instagram and on Facebook. They are not work related. They
Mm.
are mostly design. And I should have said that earlier, but that's if you plugged in my name, I think it's Thomas Harding 545 on Instagram. Not sure on Facebook. That's my personal one, but definitely on Instagram, you can see all the work that I've done.
Perfect. Thank you, Thomas. All right, everyone. Welcome back. It's time once again for my very favorite segment on Baseball by Design. Once a week, Daniel J. Simon of the Louisville-based design firm Studio Simon visits us with a trivia question. We call it Studio Simon Stumpers. Daniel J., good morning. How are you?
I am fantastic. For our listeners. The reason for the use of my middle initial by our host is because we started off mic, our little preamble before starting recording here. Paul asked me what my middle name was, and what we learned was we have the same middle name, to go with the fact that we both grew up in, well, mine was a township. I don't know if yours was a township or city, both of Wayne. Me in Wayne, New Jersey, Paul in Wayne, Pennsylvania. So, and we share a love for baseball and minor league branding. Lots in common with the two of us.
What a crazy world that we've known each other for more than a decade, and it took us that long to learn that about our middle names. We also discussed how this episode is going to drop the day after St. Patrick's Day, and on St. Patrick's Day, I reverse my last name and I go by my Irish rapper name, O'Tupac, Paul O'Tupac. I could reverse Paul as well and go as Luap O'Tupac. Next year, maybe.
Yeah, okay. But we digress, as we are wont to do.
We often
Paul,
do that.
get us back on track here.
Dan, this is a different episode this week. This was a lot of fun for me. I got to visit with a Major League Baseball reporter who has covered the Colorado Rockies for 26 seasons. He's at spring training right now as we speak. Gentleman named Thomas Harding, super good guy, nice guy, who has an interest in design and has in fact designed some of his own logos for collegiate level teams, for high school football and baseball teams. So we chatted about design. We chatted about the work that he does with the Colorado Rockies. He's one of the very first people I ever met when I got a press credential to a major league spring training clubhouse that was at the Salt River Fields at Talking Stick in Arizona for the Colorado Rockies. So, very good guy, and it was fun to talk design. And I wish we hadn't run out of time because we'd probably still be talking.
Well, but then we might not have had time for a stumper, which we're going to do right now. So, Paul, in talking about the Rockies, I would imagine your conversation did not talk much about where they play, but we're going to talk about that now. So, before moving into Coors Field in 1995, where did the Rockies play their first two seasons?
They played at a cavernous football stadium at Mile High.
That is correct, which most sports fans know as the former home of the NFL's Denver Broncos. And our studio assignment stumper today is about that very facility and asks, for what sport was that venue originally built?
Huh.
Was it built for A, football? This could be a trick question.
It could be. That could be the red herring, though.
B, baseball, or C, racing?
All right. Well, Dan, I'm gonna eliminate football because I feel like that is a little too obvious to be the answer to the question. Baseball seems like it would not be the answer because I don't know that there was ever conversation about having a major league team here that would have warranted, that those conversations would have gone far enough that it would have warranted the actual construction of a stadium of that size. It was, as I said, it was enormous. As you know, the baseball carries in the thin air out here in Colorado. And one of the problems they faced in 1993 and 1994 when the Rockies played in Mile High was that the field was so big that the outfielders were so spread out that not only was the ball flying out of the ballpark, but they couldn't cover the ground in that, enormous Aussie footy rules pitch of an outfield there. So that leaves me with racing. And I don't even know what kind of racing you're talking about. I don't know if it would have been auto racing. I don't know if it's big enough for auto racing, but I'm going to eliminate football as the possibility because that's too obvious. Although that would be quite the trickster trick for you to pull as we're approaching April Fool's Day. This is not April Fool's Day today, though. So not football, not baseball. I'm going to go racing.
Okay. Well, as this is a podcast specifically about baseball and more specifically about minor league baseball, although not today's subject of this episode, it maybe should not be surprising that the correct answer is baseball, but
Wow.
there's a story behind it. And part of the story has to do with what you said about you don't know if there was ever anything about a Major League Baseball team playing in Denver before, of course, the Rockies. Well, let's talk about this a little bit. And I learned some interesting things here. Mile High Stadium was originally built in 1948 as Bears Stadium, home of the minor league baseball Denver Bears. It had a single deck, 18,000 seat grandstand. And in the late 1950s, the stadium capacity was increased in anticipation of Denver being one of the founding franchises in a new third major league. It was going to be called the Continental League. It was started by, gosh, you know what? I don't remember the name of the gentleman who came up with the idea and put this into action, but Branch Rickey, the former general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, who famously signed Jackie Robinson to be the first black major leaguer, he was going to be at the helm of this league, president or whatever. Alas, that league never happened, but a new major football league did in 1960, and Denver was one of the founding franchises in that league. So capacity at Bear Stadium was further increased. as it was now going to be home of both the Denver Bears, they continued to play there, and the AFL's Denver Broncos. But then over the years, there were several more expansions, eventually bringing the seating capacity to around 76,000, the cavernous number you aforementioned. Although the attendance for opening day of the Rockies' inaugural season in 1993 is listed at 80,227, and that's thanks to some temporary bleachers that were installed. The Bears renamed the Zephyrs in 1984. They played at Mile High through the 1992 season before relocating to where, Paul?
Those Denver Zephyrs went to New Orleans to become the New Orleans Zephyrs, named not for the train that the Denver Zephyrs were named for, but for a roller coaster in New Orleans. And then after a few short years, they rebranded as the New Orleans Baby Cakes. And then those New Orleans Baby Cakes eventually moved to Wichita, where they are now the Wind Surge. That is a
Paul,
well-traveled franchise.
our host, Paul Caputo, that was just all off the top of his head. No research there. This man knows his minor league branding. So anyway, when the then Denver Zephyrs had to move to make way for the Rockies, and when the Rockies took up residence at Mile High in 1993, playing in this cavernous NFL football stadium, they set a Major League Baseball single season attendance record of almost 4.5 million fans in their inaugural season, a record that stands to this day.
The Colorado baseball fans are just dying to support a successful baseball team. It's such a shame that outside of a few postseason runs that this team has made, including making to the World Series in 2007, beating my Phillies on the way. It's just such a shame that that they've never been able to put together a consistent winning team here, because I think the fans in this community would really love that. The Denver Bears, there was a whole exhibit about the Denver Bears at the Denver Historical Society that was really fun, and they had a lot of the old uniforms. That team, well, I guess it was two different franchises or several different franchises, goes all the way back to like the late 1800s. That the Denver Bears were around a long, long time in several different iterations. The franchise that is now the Wichita Wind Surge, that franchise was the one that debuted in the 50s, but there was a different franchise before that had all sorts of awesome, fun names as well. In like the 1800s and the early 1900s, they were the Grizzlies and the Gulfs and the Mountaineers and the Solis and the Mountain Lions, and so they had a lot of very Denvery names, but they were, for most of their history, they were the Denver Bears. I'm a little embarrassed not to know that that's what Mile High was originally built for, was a baseball team, not only a baseball team, but the Denver Bears, who have such a rich history here.
I wouldn't be embarrassed about that. The reality is, we know Mile High Stadium as a large football stadium, and I would have just assumed, had not my research unearthed information otherwise, that the Denver Bears played at a baseball stadium that had nothing to do with Mile High Stadium. It really doesn't make a lot of sense that a baseball stadium grew into a football stadium, but in this case, it did indeed. One more fascinating fact about the Denver Bears,
Yeah.
in addition to all the fascinating facts you just shared with us, is that I had a Denver Bears t-shirt that I wore so frequently and for so long that it literally fell apart and I could wear it no longer. So
Those are the best kinds of shirts, Dan. I love that. I have a Denver Bears t-shirt that is it's a really fun design, sort of a cartoony. It reminds me of like the old Asheville Tourists branding a little bit, sort of a cartoon fun bear. My thing now with t-shirts is I have so many t-shirts that I can't wear them enough that they fall apart, right? Like, because I only, if I wear them on a rotation, which I try to do, I wear them, once every 3 months. So, it helps keep them in good condition. But then every time I go to a baseball stadium or say spring training, I end up with more t-shirts. And so one of these days I'm going to have to thin the herd a little bit.
okay. Well, enjoy your plethora of t-shirts for now before you start thinning that herd.
Dan, 364 days till St. Patrick's Day. Thanks very much. Once again, this has been fun. And we'll see you next week with a Studio Simon Stumper.
See you next Stump Day.